and Goblin Reddit. Today's story is...
My cousin ruined my marriage and got pregnant by my husband. When my parents asked me to forgive her, I discovered an unforgivable family secret. 6 years ago, I ended my marriage because my husband had been unfaithful to me with my cousin, who had stayed at our house for a few weeks. He only needed that brief period to betray me, which clearly reflects what kind of husband he was. My ex-husband and I are now 35 years old. We met at our place of work. We were together for 3 years before he proposed, and we were married when we were both 27. We had been married for 2 years when the incident occurred. At the time, my cousin, whom I will call Carol, had moved to our city to pursue her acting career and stayed at our house for a couple of weeks before moving into her own apartment. She had dropped out of college. She would have been in her 20s, while my husband and I were a decade apart. This made everything even more unpleasant because, although she only stayed with us for 2 or 3 weeks, apparently she and my husband started seeing each other behind my back. I guess it was a regular thing because after she moved out, she visited us a few weeks later and, together with my husband, they revealed the whole truth to me. She was pregnant, and my husband was the father. Naturally, my ex begged me not to leave him. He made numerous promises, assuring me that he would never disappoint me again and that we could still make our marriage work. But there are lines that cannot be crossed, and this is definitely one of them. I packed my belongings and left immediately, stayed with a friend for a week, and filed for divorce. In a matter of months, it was all over. Since then, I have had no communication with my ex-husband, and I have had no contact with Carol. Of course, I did inform her parents about what had happened. She was obviously very upset, so I told them everything I knew and made it clear that I would no longer support their daughter in any way. It took me years to recover from the situation because my ex, in whom I had placed all my trust, betrayed me by getting intimate with this young woman whom I had always considered to be a younger sister. Carol knew perfectly well that I had always seen her as a little sister, as I have no siblings of my own. She knew how much I loved her, and I allowed her to stay in my house rent-free while supporting her aspirations, even when her parents did not completely agree with her career choice. But this was how she decided to repay me, becoming intimate with my husband and destroying my marriage. Since then, I have cut off all relations with Carol and my aunt and uncle because I had nothing to say to them. My parents also informed me that they had cut off ties with Carol's parents, and as I had no reason to doubt them, I believed them. But now I'm not so sure. Carol's mother is my father's younger sister, and my mother also has a close relationship with my aunt, as they were university roommates. In fact, that was how my parents met, so I knew it would be difficult for them to break off the relationship with Carol's parents because of their close bond. However, I was grateful that they had decided to do it for me, to value me. To clarify, I didn't ask them to do it. It was their decision because they believed they couldn't keep in touch with them with a clear conscience. However, it seems that they have changed their minds because a few days ago I received an invitation from Carol to her wedding. In the email, she asked me to be her maid of honor. It was very strange, because 6 years have passed without any contact, and there was no formal apology from her at any time, not even in this email. Suddenly, her decision to invite me to her wedding and ask me to be her maid of honor seemed completely absurd to me. Although 6 years have passed, and I have gotten over my marriage, I don't think I can ever forget that betrayal. Therefore, I replied to that email rejecting the invitation and refusing to be her bridesmaid. And while I was at it, I told her that I didn't want to hear from her again and that she should stay out of my life. I consider my reaction to be quite moderate, considering the facts. But my parents called me yesterday to talk to me about this situation. They informed me that Carol's parents had contacted them, and apparently Carol was very affected by my response, as she thought this was an opportunity for us to reconcile. But instead of forgiving, I had chosen to hold on to the resentment. My parents believe that, given the time that has passed, I should forgive her and take this opportunity to reconnect with my family, to bring us all back together again. I can't believe that's their opinion, especially when they know all the suffering I experienced. So I ended up arguing with them. They told me I was being irrational and that we all make mistakes. They said that I have also made mistakes, so I can't judge others forever. But my mistakes don't include getting intimate with my cousin's husband. The difference with her is that she destroyed a home. That is not a mistake. It is a conscious choice. She was not a child who didn't know what she was doing. She knew perfectly well what was happening. I should mention that she decided to continue with the pregnancy, but unfortunately she suffered a miscarriage. If that hadn't happened, she would now have a son of about 5 years old with my husband, and I am convinced that she would have taken my place as his wife. However, after the miscarriage, they no longer had any reason to stay together, and from what I have heard, they ended their relationship a few weeks later. Her parents took her back to our hometown. If it hadn't been for the miscarriage, I would be married to my ex-husband, living in the house where I used to live and raising a child that wasn't mine. I don't think any reasonable person could forgive and forget something like that. So I'm grateful for the space to let off steam with my story. It's been extremely difficult to have to face all this again, and writing it down is quite liberating. Update 1. It's time for my weekly venting session. Yesterday, I decided to confront my parents. I finally called them after avoiding them for a couple of days because I really needed to know if they had been telling me the truth about having cut off contact with Carol's family all this time, or if they had simply been lying to me so that I wouldn't get angry with them. When I called them, I didn't give them a chance to speak first and direct the conversation. I asked the question directly and bluntly because I didn't want to waste time and I needed an immediate answer. But as soon as I asked them about Carol and whether they had kept in touch with her family in recent years, they started to hesitate. I knew instantly that something wasn't right, but I wasn't going to end the call without knowing the truth. Eventually, they admitted that, although they had tried to stay away from them for a couple of years after my divorce, they had finally resumed contact and reconciled a few years ago. They had made sure to hide it from me because they were convinced that I would be angry. But I didn't get angry, it was much worse. I immediately hung up the phone because I had nothing more to say to them and nothing I wanted to hear from them. They had lied to me, and that was what hurt the most, not the fact that they were in contact with Carol's family. Strange as it may seem. Yes, it bothered me, but not as much as the fact that they had hidden it from me. They continued to try to contact me, but I was too angry, so I didn't answer any of their calls. Then they started sending me messages expressing how sorry they were for keeping this from me. They knew full well that it would upset me greatly if they kept in touch with Carol and her parents, and that's why they decided to keep it a secret. If they knew, they shouldn't be surprised by my reaction. I don't understand why they went to such lengths. I don't know what would have happened if they had told me the truth. Maybe it would have hurt, but at least I would have known that they were being honest with me. I might even have understood the circumstances because, after all, Carol's mother is my father's sister and my mother's best friend. It's not as if they had encouraged Carol to ruin my marriage. That was her personal decision, and I'm pretty sure they weren't happy about it either. I didn't blame them directly, but I was relieved that my parents avoided them, as it would have been awkward if our families had continued to be in touch. However, even if they had chosen to keep in touch and been honest with me from the start, I wouldn't be as upset as I am now. That's the problem. They lied to me and then tried to cover it up for so many years. Even now, they were pressuring me to resolve the situation with Carol and forgive her. They were still thinking about themselves and not about me, and I can't imagine more selfish behavior. After a while, I felt really bad, so I decided to block them because I don't want to have any relationship with these people anymore. They clearly don't respect or understand me, and that's the bare minimum in any kind of relationship. I've already experienced betrayal from people I loved, so I have a problem with disloyalty. But if I could live without my ex, I'm sure I can live without my parents too. Of course it's going to be painful, I know that perfectly well. It will probably be even more difficult because for the last 6 years, knowing that at least my parents supported me was what helped me to carry on. But now I know that they have also betrayed my trust, and as much as it hurts, I don't want to keep people like that in my life. I think I've already experienced enough pain and betrayal for a lifetime. I don't need any more of this. Update 2. I haven't heard from my parents since 2 weeks ago when I blocked them. At least until yesterday morning, when they decided to visit me uninvited. As soon as I opened the door, they began to express that they had felt tremendously guilty about their actions and that they wanted to apologize personally. They mentioned that they had tried to contact me several times over the past 2 weeks, but since I had blocked them, it had been impossible. Indeed, that was my intention. With no other option, they decided to fly here to talk to me face to face and resolve our differences. They did not intend to upset me, and they acknowledged that they had been selfish beyond forgiveness, but even so, they wanted to try to apologize. I was somewhat skeptical about talking to them because I was still quite upset about their lies, but I decided to give them a chance. I let them in. They began by explaining that when they decided to reconcile with Carol's parents, they too were going through a very difficult period. It was understandable, as Carol had made many unwise decisions. She had not been an outstanding student at school, and it had already been difficult for her to get into university. When she was finally accepted at a reputable institution, she decided to drop out in order to pursue her dream of becoming an actress. I supported her in that decision too, because, although she was not extraordinarily talented, I must admit that in the videos I had seen of her performances, her passion for acting was clear. With time and experience, there was definitely room for improvement. So she left university and came to live with us to pursue her aspirations. I had no idea that her dreams would include my husband. It was extremely difficult for her parents because her older siblings had followed conventional paths and were quite satisfied with them, but Carol didn't seem to fit that model. Her parents feared her impulsive nature. They don't need to explain it to me, I saw it for myself. Then, just a few months after moving to our city, they found out through me that she was pregnant with my husband's child and that she had apparently destroyed my marriage. As if they weren't already worried enough about her, I gave them this devastating news. They tried to get her to come home, but she refused, saying that she wanted to have the baby and stay with my husband. Throughout my divorce proceedings, Carol's parents were fighting their own battle trying to guide their daughter in the right direction, while Carol simply refused to listen to them. They were going through an extremely difficult period. My parents had also cut off all contact with them. It was tremendously difficult for them to face all this on their own. When Carol finally suffered a miscarriage and returned home, her parents didn't know how to proceed. They began trying to contact my parents for emotional support and repeatedly apologize for Carol's actions, even though it wasn't exactly their responsibility. My parents tried hard to ignore them, but in the end they couldn't hold out and ended up responding to offer some emotional support. In addition, the rest of the family also avoided them because although we tried to keep the situation as discreet as possible, rumors spread and people started to comment. I admit that part of that could have been my responsibility because I talked to some cousins about it, and although I asked them to be discreet, there is no way of knowing who might have shared information with others. I don't feel guilty about it either. Talking about my experience is a right I have earned. Although the situation has improved slightly and the family no longer completely avoids them, things have not gone back to the way they were. Over the years, Carol's parents have expressed deep regret and remorse for what happened. Even they have not been able to fully forgive Carol, but they have accepted the situation because, at the end of the day, she is still their daughter. My parents explained to me that they have been their only source of support and strength. Apart from them, Carol's parents were practically rejected by everyone for a time. My parents didn't want to abandon them completely for something that wasn't even their fault, especially when they faced the consequences of their daughter's actions every day. However, they also knew that I was going through an extremely difficult time. They didn't want to hurt me by keeping in touch with Carol or her parents. Without realizing it, they began to hide the truth from me. Although they considered revealing the truth to me at some point, they never did because they were afraid of hurting me or making me angry. What they feared most was losing me because they believed that if they told me the truth, I would push them away. So they continued lying to me and feeling guilty about it. Even recently, when they pressed me to reconcile with Carol, it was because they no longer wanted to hide their friendship and support for Carol's parents. They repeatedly apologized for their words and acknowledged that they had no right to suggest that to me, knowing what I had experienced. They accepted that it was my decision whether or not I wanted to forgive Carol. I appreciate that they at least tried to apologize and salvage our relationship. I am glad that they finally revealed the truth about everything to me. However, I still need time to process this and come to terms with what happened before deciding whether I want to keep them in my life. I have been through a lot, and they have not been in my position. They do not understand how terrible it feels to be betrayed by the people you love, not just once, but repeatedly. They seem to understand my perspective. They told me I could take as long as I needed, and that they would wait for my response. Now, that is exactly what I will do. I will try to think about everything and see what happens. Update 3. A few days have passed since my last update, And although I have not been able to make a decision regarding my parents, I have received several messages from Carol's parents. I haven't had any communication with them for 6 years. It's not that I blame them directly, but they are her parents and I knew whose side I would be on. Obviously, after everything that had happened, it would be very uncomfortable for either of us to communicate with the other, so we simply avoided each other. They sent me some messages expressing that they had never properly apologized for past events, but that they now wished to do so. They also acknowledged that it was perhaps not their place to apologize for their daughter's actions, but as parents, they felt partially responsible. Because, regardless of how much children mature, in the end, their actions reflect to some extent the upbringing they received from their parents. At least, that's what they believe. That's what they said. For a long time, they didn't approach me because they felt they didn't deserve to talk to me after everything their daughter had done. Carol practically destroyed a marriage, and although it was definitely my husband's responsibility to, they couldn't deny Carol's part in it. If he had been unfaithful to me with her, he could have cheated on me with anyone else too. But the fact is that it was Carol who ruined my marriage, and that is something they can never change, no matter how much they ask for my forgiveness. But now, regardless of whether or not I accept their apologies, or whether or not it is their place to apologize, they simply wanted to let me know that they deeply regretted everything that had gone wrong. Moreover, they regretted having contributed to my parents hiding the truth from me. As if they hadn't already caused enough damage in my life, they had no right to put my parents in a position where they had to lie to me. They wanted to apologize for that too, in addition to everything else. They acknowledged that they had forced my parents to become accomplices to lies, and that they had even collaborated with them in maintaining the appearance. For all that, they expressed sincere regret. They admitted that although they had also suffered because of Carol, I had to endure much more because of all of them. No matter how much they apologized to me, there was very little they could do to change what had happened. But even so, they felt they had to apologize, and that's why they sent me this message. They hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive them, even if it was for the last time. I've probably reread their message about 30 times in the last few hours, and I really don't know what to think about it. One thing is clear, this situation wasn't as simple as all that. It's not as black and white as I had always thought. Although nothing will change the fact that I was the one who suffered the most, it cannot be denied that other people have also had to face their own difficulties. I don't know what to say. It's not that I don't feel compassion for them, I do. Because of Carol, her parents also had to suffer, and I know they are good people. They didn't deserve this, but I am also a good person. I didn't deserve it either. So it's an extremely confusing situation. If I was already confused enough before, this message has made it even more difficult to reach a conclusion about what I want to do. Update 4. Several weeks have passed since my last update, and until recently, I had been avoiding everyone. I needed space and time to reflect on everything I had discovered in the last few weeks. It was too much information to process in such a short period of time, especially everything I learned about my parents, so I needed time and I didn't want to rush into any decisions. I have been considering what to do about my aunt and uncle and what to do about my parents, mainly because as for my cousin, I am absolutely clear that I do not wish to have any further relationship with her, and that is non-negotiable. As for my aunt and uncle, I have decided to forgive them, so to speak. It is not exactly forgiving them, but I have decided not to hold any kind of resentment towards them. I have written to them to let them know that we are on good terms, but that they should not expect our relationship to be close. They are still my cousin's parents, and I am not going to expect them to break ties with their daughter for my sake. Therefore, we maintain a cordial but distant relationship. They thank me for responding, because it was the only thing they expected of me. They understand my pain, and they understand that I prefer to keep my distance from my cousin. So that concludes my situation with my uncles and aunt. But with my parents, the situation is completely different. They deliberately set out to hurt me. They withheld information from me for years, and they tried to manipulate me into attending a wedding where I had no purpose. This is much harder to forgive. I have informed them that they will remain blocked, and I would appreciate it if they did not try to show up at my home again without an invitation. In fact, I would appreciate it if they did not show up at all, because they will not get an invitation. I don't know how many people will agree with my decision to keep my parents out of my life, but that is how I feel right now. And now that I've freed myself from this drama, my life has regained considerable free time. Time that I will use to go shopping and select an elegant dress to attend my cousin's wedding. I'm sorry, I needed to make a joke to alleviate so much drama that my parents have introduced into my existence. My cousin is completely wrong if she thinks I will attend her wedding, and even more so if she thinks I will be her bridesmaid. The only reason I would accept would be to smash her face in with the cake. But I wouldn't invest in a plane ticket for that, and I wouldn't spend my time even if she paid for the ticket. I feel like I'm wasting energy by writing something related to her. She doesn't deserve it. But at least it's preferable to the other alternatives. Update 5. I don't consider this wasting my words on my cousin because I see it as an investment that has paid off by brightening my day. My dress for my cousin's wedding will have to wait for another celebration to be worn. But the important thing here is not that the wedding was canceled, but how it happened. My uncles have done something that I consider to be superior to the actions of my parents. They spoke to my cousin's fiancé and revealed what had happened to me some years ago. They weren't sure if he was aware of the situation, but judging by his reaction, he was completely unaware of the facts. They didn't intend to cancel the wedding, but they wanted him to have all the information because they never approved of their daughter's behavior. Her fiancé canceled all the preparations because he didn't want to marry someone who had been unfaithful. I think it was a very sensible decision because someone who has acted incorrectly once could do so again in the future. Now I should say that my cousin's fiancé is an excellent person, how much I admire him, and that he is an exemplary figure that everyone should imitate. But before you draw any conclusions, let me tell you what happened next. I have been in touch with my aunt and uncle recently, as my cousin was the reason why I had not been in touch with them. But they have stopped talking to them after their actions, although I don't think they were the negative ones in the story. They have shared some significant details with me about my cousin's ex-fiancé. After a few weeks, I can't be sure how many, he started seeing one of my cousin's friends. And I'm not the one making this claim. It was my uncles who suggested that maybe, just maybe, the fiancé wasn't being completely faithful. It makes sense. You want your partner to be loyal, but the rules are relaxed when it comes to yourself. I can only think that like attracts like. And the friend is probably not very different from him or from my cousin. Only she has managed to get her hands on the jackpot, if we can call my cousin's ex-fiancé a jackpot. However, I recognize my lack of objectivity in this matter. Having caused my cousin such a situation adds some positive points for me, although I understand that it is not right. But when it comes to my cousin, a certain amount of infidelity seems justified, don't you think? I can't help thinking about my parents either, because they damaged their relationship with their daughter because of a wedding that will not take place. What's next? Investing in tulips.